Okay, there we go. Welcome. I shouldn't have touched that. Welcome to this liberal religious congregation, the Idaho Falls Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Victoria McDonald. I am a member of the Worship Assistants, and I'm assisting Reverend Kevin Carson, our minister. Some of us are bringing our best selves to this space. Some of us are bringing our struggling selves. All of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. Some of us already have open hearts, and some of us aren't quite there yet because our hearts have gotten a little beat up this past year and a half, and we might have forgotten how to trust and open. Your heart is welcome here, no matter how bruised. We welcome you among us. All of us are imperfect, but we're here to drop our defenses and trust that what happens in worship is powerful and life-giving. Together we affirm that this day, our being together, can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than we woke up this morning. Those are words by Erica Hewitt, a UUA Minister of Worship Arts. It's quite a title. Announcements. If you have a joy or concern, there are little pieces of paper back by Pam when you come in, and you can write your joy, concern, sorrow, and Reverend Kevin will pick them up. I think you're doing that? Okay. Our church is self-supporting and depends upon members and friends to maintain it. You can donate by accessing the upper right-hand corner. We also have a basket in the back. If you want to leave a check here, we will not pass the basket around. Or you can send a check like I do to Unitarian Universalist Church, Box 50376, Idaho Falls, Idaho 83405. Please remember, what is given in love is received in deep gratitude and appreciation. May this congregation be worthy of your gifts. Also, please send in your joys or concerns via the chat box if you're streaming, so that Reverend Kevin can light a candle for you and Daniel can read them. We will also read any other joys or concerns that have been sent in by email. Are there any other announcements? I think I saw a hand over there. No, I'm just imagining. Go ahead. What, Elizabeth?
I just wanted to tell people about the multi-sensory table over at the other end of church, and there's plenty of fidgets for everybody to use. So,
for toys to use while you're in church, just in case Reverend Kevin is putting you asleep. Okay, we got it. Thank you.
our member who knits during service is not here today, so people do bring their own sometimes.
Okay, knitting, yeah. Okay, never let a free moment go past. As we enter sacred space, I encourage you to slow your breathing as I ring the peace bowl 3 times. One technique I struggle to use is to breathe in very deeply, pause for just a bit, then breathe out slowly. Breathing is essential for all beings, and the method of breathing affects our mood and our health. Deep breathing allows our muscles and our minds to relax. And now we'll have the prelude by Jessica. Peace Bowl. Thank you. That's what happens when you go to Alaska for 7 months. You forget what to do. I'm sorry. Please, I apologize. Okay, this is when you do get to practice your breathing. Now our prelude. Okay. Please join me in repeating our church's covenant that is included in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And as I read the words for the chalice lighting, Reverend Kevin will light the chalice. We light this chalice as a beacon of hope for those of us who are gathering today, either in present or on our computers. May we gain strength as we connect virtually and in person.
Good morning. It is so nice to see all of you here today. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Today by Mary Oliver. Today I'm flying low, and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must. The bees in the gardens rumbling a little, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though I'm traveling a terrific distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. We are not able to sing together because of COVID yet, but I invite you now to enjoy our opening hymn, number 360, Here We Are Gathered.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us, as we give we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Today's Time for All Ages is called Ruth and Naomi. It's part of the Creating Home curriculum in Tapestry of Faith, adapted from Hebrew Scripture. Once long ago, in the city of Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, there lived a man named Elimelech. Elimelech was married to Naomi, and they had 2 sons, Chilion and Mahlon. The time came when a great famine struck Bethlehem, and none of the farmers could produce enough food for the city. Elimelech was no longer able to provide for his family, so he decided they would move to another city, Moab. Several years after moving, Elimelech died. His wife, Naomi, was taken care of by her sons and their wives, Orpah and Ruth, 2 women from Moab. Sadly, after living in Moab for 10 years, Naomi's sons both died too. When she heard that the famine in Bethlehem was over, Naomi decided she wanted to return home. Her daughters, Orpah and Ruth, walked her toward Judah so she could return to Bethlehem. When they were almost there, Naomi turned to her daughters-in-law. She blessed them for looking after her and for having been good wives to her 2 sons. She praised them for being loyal. She said that they should return home to their families. Neither woman wanted to leave Naomi, but Orpah eventually turned and went back and went home. Ruth, however, would not leave Naomi. She said, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Nothing will ever separate us." Naomi saw that she was determined. So the 2 women returned to Naomi's hometown. Naomi and Ruth found a place where they could live in Bethlehem, but they did not have any food. It was harvest time. Ruth and Naomi saw some women walking behind the men harvesting the barley. The women were picking up the stray stalks that the men left behind. Ruth went to a neighbor's farm and started doing the same. The farmer who owned the fields was named Boaz. He saw Ruth working on his farm and asked his workers who she was. They told him about Naomi's return and that this was the dutiful, loving daughter-in-law who came back to Bethlehem with Naomi to live with her and take care of her. The farmer, Boaz, because he heard how devoted Ruth was to Naomi, knew that surely God looked kindly on Ruth for her allegiance to Naomi. He instructed his workers to leave extra barley unpicked in the fields to make sure Ruth had enough food for her and Naomi. Ruth was very happy to be able to gather the barley. She ground the barley and used it to make bread for herself and Naomi. When she told Naomi that the barley was collected from the farm of a kind man named Boaz, Naomi realized that Boaz was a cousin of her own husband, Elimelech, who had died so long before. Boaz had also realized that Ruth had been married to Chilion, one of his own relatives. He saw how loyal Ruth was to Chilion's family even after Chilion died. He could see her loyalty in the way she took care of Naomi. Boaz felt responsible to help, and he enjoyed being with Ruth, so he asked her to marry him, and she said yes. After Boaz and Ruth married, Naomi lived with them. When Boaz and Ruth had a little son, Naomi helped take care of him as a grandmother. The end.
Reverend Kevin will light a candle for the joys and concerns given to us today. When do you want to do yours? Okay. We have 2, 3, 4 that were handed in. 2 joys. We 2 Schaefers got our boosters. Our 9.5-year-old grandson, Gabriel, got his first shot Friday. We are so happy to have this available to us. This is from Roby and Bob. We had dinner with Sue Wild in Boise 2 weeks ago at a great sushi restaurant. She is doing wonderfully well. This is a joy and a sorrow from Lisa Christensen. Gary and I are moving back east. I know. We are excited to be moving close to family and sad to be leaving the community we found here. We'll miss you, Lisa, very much. And this is a joy and a sorrow from Reverend Kevin and Marty. A sorrow at the passing of our beloved dog, Holly, and a joy at the memory of over 12 years of her loving companionship. That's tough. I have 3 candles. I have 2 joys. My brother and sister-in-law stayed in Idaho Falls until Friday, so we visited often and shared many dinners and dog walks together. And I've not had this much opportunity to be with my brother since I left in high school. We were together some, but not for months. Another joy, Arthur and Annalise Cole sponsored last night's Children's Symphony Concert, Paddington Bear's first concert. It was lots of fun with gorgeous music, and I think you can still stream it if you'd like to. My concern is the upcoming jury trial of the 3 men who murdered jogger Ahmaud Arbery. The jury consists of 1 black and 11 whites. May all jurors be impartial and, quote, seek the truth in love.
We have 2 joys from the chat from Karen Shropshire. The first one is her daughter and son-in-law Jan and Matt Brookhart announced that they are expecting their 3rd baby, which is her grandbaby, due in February. Jennifer grew up in the UUCIF. She and Matt were married by Reverend Lynn in 2014, and they now live in Salt Lake City. Her second joy is that her daughter Sarah Shropshire became engaged to Kobe Hawker, both of Boise. Sarah attended the UUCIF through her teen years, occasionally singing on Sunday. And I have a concern from Anita Carpenter. She says, please keep my sister-in-law, Becky Gronzo, in your thoughts and prayers. She's in the hospital, suffering with lung and heart disease.
And let us acknowledge all those joys and sorrows that remain unspoken but in our hearts. I would light one more candle, but we have reached our limits on candles this morning, so it's nice to see, actually. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the book Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The rocky coast and Kickapoo cliffs helped to generate what has become known as the intermediate disturbance hypothesis that diversity of species is highest when disturbance occurs at an interval between the extremes. Ecologists have shown that in the complete absence of disturbance, superior competitors can slowly encroach upon other species and eliminate them by competitive dominance. Where disturbance is very frequent, only the hardiest of species can survive the tumult. At intermediate frequencies, there seems to be a balance in between that permits a great variety of species to flourish. Disturbance is just frequent enough to prevent competitive dominance, and yet stable periods are long enough for successional species to become established. The intermediate disturbance hypothesis has been verified in a host of other ecosystems: prairies, rivers, coral reefs, and forests. I like to think of the satisfying coherence in that pattern. Mosses, mussels, forests, and prairies all seem to be governed by the same principle. The apparent destruction of a disturbance is, in fact, an act of renewal, provided the balance is right. Please enjoy our next hymn, number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far-off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
There's a verse in the book of Proverbs that says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life." I think it is fair to say that over the last 19 months, since the nation began to shut down in response to the COVID pandemic, we have all endured many hopes deferred that left us sick at heart. 19 months of businesses, schools, and churches being forced to close or find alternative virtual means for continuing. 19 months of anxiety, changing rules about wearing masks and social distancing as we waited for a vaccine to be developed and distributed. 19 months of disruption to the ordinary pace of life, even months of isolation from family and friends. But if it were only a matter of having our normal routines disrupted or even being forced into isolation for a time, the pandemic would be bad, but it would mostly be a huge inconvenience. It has been much worse than that, of course. On November 1st, the global death toll from COVID topped 5 million. And this includes over 200 people from Bonneville County alone. Families will endure grief for years to come. And it is tragic that so many of these deaths in America could have been avoided were it not for the spread of disinformation and the cynical use of the pandemic by some for political purposes. Globally, a much more aggressive vaccination rollout is long overdue in developing countries. Viruses do not respect international borders, so all of us in the wealthier nations not only have a moral obligation to do more, but a practical self-interest to consider. And let us acknowledge that the pandemic has been harder on some people than others, including the many people who have continued to work for all of us during the crisis to ensure that the essential goods and services we need remained available. Let us give thanks for the first responders, nurses, and doctors who have been worked to exhaustion in hospitals as they fill with the sick and dying, forcing a few places, such as Idaho, to initiate so-called crisis standards of care. Let us give thanks for the teachers, staff, and administrators who have struggled to keep our children learning, either online or adjusting to changing restrictions on in-person classes, and the school board members who have faced threats and harassment just for trying to keep our students safe. And let us also give thanks for the truck drivers, the grocery and other retail workers, and all the farmers and laborers, countless of them. This pandemic has exposed how much we depend on an unseen host of people whose names we will never know. We are more acutely aware of the interdependent web of all existence than ever before. By coincidence, the timing of our UU ministerial search process meant that I was scheduled to fly here to Idaho Falls for pre-candidating interviews on Friday, March 13th, 2020, the very day a national emergency was declared and everything began to grind to a halt. After discussing the situation with your wonderful search team, we decided it would not be prudent for me to fly at the time, and they arranged a series of virtual meetings, a sermon, and even a tour of the building instead. Incidentally, I was one of the first ministerial candidates to do this, and the UU Ministerial Settlement Office was very interested to hear about the details to assist other congregations. After you chose me to be your candidate, we did the candidating week meetings and sermons online as well. And since I'm speaking to you today, the process obviously worked. I am grateful for the creativity of your search team and the technology that made this possible. After years of seminary and meeting the other requirements of UU ministry, I never imagined that my search would be anything like that. And I admit the process felt a bit diminished without the opportunity to meet in person and getting to know you and your community. But my disappointment is hardly worth mentioning. I feel much worse about situations like the many high school and college seniors who were forced to have an alternate graduation and couldn't enjoy a normal graduation ceremony because of the pandemic. They had every reason to expect a joyful rite of passage like generations before them. I also empathize with couples who had to radically alter their wedding plans, or the many others who had to cancel a trip of a lifetime or other major plans. It was heartbreaking, for example, to see YouTube videos of Appalachian Trail thru hikers who had barely begun their journey north before being forced to leave the trail. It often takes years to plan the resources and the time off for a journey like this, and having to abruptly abandon their hike may mean the opportunity is lost for years to come. So many hopes deferred, so much heartache. But for most of us, the COVID pandemic is not the worst thing we have ever endured, and it may not even make the top 10. I often think of the Buddhists saying that life is filled with 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. And some days it is hard for me to imagine that whatever remains of my 10,000 joys will ever show up. Loss, disappointment, and difficulties will always find their way to us at times. We may wish that we could avoid the sorrows and enjoy a life filled with only the joys, but that is simply not how life works. Perhaps the best we can hope for is that the joys outnumber the sorrows in the end. To a large degree, I accept that our sorrows are amplified by how we respond to them. So we have some control over the depth of our despair. It is a measure of our resilience in the face of adversity. However, there are some tragedies we experience that are so overwhelming that we should forgive ourselves if we find it difficult to find peace or acceptance. Such sorrows can even make it difficult to find any joy at all, no matter how hard the universe offers it to you. It may even diminish our capacity to experience joy because we are constantly haunted by the fear of losing it. Or when we do experience joy, we might cling to it so fiercely that letting go, which we must inevitably do, is devastating. In some cases, especially after the death of a loved one, it may take a spiritual practice or therapy to be able to heal and find a way back to life. As Mary Oliver said in her poem In Blackwater Woods, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. But life is not only what happens to us, for better or worse. A good life is not simply a life absent of sorrows. More important is how we experience the joys and sorrows that come our way and how we respond to them. Integrating the good and bad experiences into who we are is important to our overall peace and well-being. And it is probable that a certain amount of adversity is ultimately better for us in the long run. It is hard to say what the right balance of joys and sorrows would be for a typical human life. Is it 80-20, 60-40, 50-50? But nature may offer a suggestion. When I read the section of Robin Wall Kimmerer's book that I shared with you this morning, I was struck by how the intermediate disturbance hypothesis she describes applies to both plants and animals across a variety of ecosystems. It made me think about how it might be applicable to the human condition as well. Perhaps each of us thrives best in a unique Goldilocks zone with enough adversity and enough joy to be just right. Without both, we could not experience the fullness of life and appreciate the wonderful mystery of existence. A life filled with too much joy might leave us unappreciative of the fragile beauty of being alive. and the importance of our relationships with the myriad beings of the web of life. And a life filled with too much sorrow might leave us unable to experience the wonder and awe that offers itself to us in every moment. So back to that verse in Proverbs. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. As we emerge from the challenges and deferred hopes of the last 19 months, a tree of life is waiting for us in so many ways. And it certainly feels like that for me today, seeing actual people in the pews for the first time since I accepted the call to be your next settled minister. It was a bit daunting for us to pack up everything in Rhode Island and drive for days across the country in the middle of a pandemic. It was a leap of faith to accept your call without ever setting foot in Idaho until the day we arrived and met the moving truck at our apartment. I can truly say I have not been disappointed. The pandemic has made meeting folks in person and getting to know the community a slower process than I would have liked, but it turns out that you are even nicer in person. For the ancient Hebrew author of that verse in Proverbs, the tree of life that comes with a desire fulfilled is a metaphor with many positive nuances, from wisdom to calmness to divine blessing. I suspect the author intended it to be so nuanced, but I think the emphasis on wisdom is especially important. I think the point the author was hinting at was understanding that sorrows will always be with us, but so too are the joys of fulfilling our desires. The wisdom of this realization brings its own joy and contentment, or at least the beginning of healing and the possibility of moving forward. As it says in another verse in Proverbs, wisdom is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called happy. The tree of life is an archetype that spans many religious traditions, from ancient pagan roots to modern times. And it is typically associated with life and connecting the earthly realm to the divine, sometimes representing God's love or the promise of salvation. And in all these interpretations of the archetype, there is a sense of holy connection to the human. And I think this works whether we believe in God or some other divine source, or whether we simply acknowledge our interdependence within the great web of all existence. This reminds me of another point that Kimmerer makes about ecosystems when we look at the impacts of disturbances. Diversity and interconnectedness are essential for resilience. This is the most prevalent in forests. So it is no wonder that the tree of life archetype seems so appropriate. Human beings are meant to live in communities of diverse talents and personalities. We need each other to celebrate our joys and endure our sorrows. There's a good reason we invite each other to share our joys and sorrows in our Sunday services. It is a ritual to acknowledge our sacred connection to one another. Though the pandemic is still with us, there have been many positive developments in recent weeks that suggest the world is slowly returning to life. Our desires for a more normal life seem to be coming to fruition, from the small mundane routines to big positive changes like the vaccine now being available to everyone 5 and older, and promising new drug therapies for those who become infected. Some hopes remain deferred for now, but life flows on. The joys of hopes and desires fulfilled await us like a tree of life on the horizon. As it says in my favorite verse from our last hymn, through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? I invite you to enjoy our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always an elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Our closing words are the poem Saying Yes by Roseanne V. Shawiak. Sorrowfully echoing, calling through the trees, whispers softly sighing, floating upon the breeze. Life falls, sliding through a side door, one that has not been marked, but opens quickly when given a second chance. Entire world opens up to an invitation. Love is emanating from people everywhere, splendidly opening upon a new shore, being rinsed clean, a pure and newly sprung life. All around, sounds of nature are pouring forth in tribute of our lives and experiences. Bowing down, kneeling on one knee, saying yes with a gentle happiness and a joy so great it cannot be contained. Flowing out upon others who are in need, filling them with the love and peace of a new world without war.
Please join with me as we read the words in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now join us for the Postlude Nocturne by Benjamin Britten.